All right, well, thanks for clicking play. I'm Mike Hartmann, one of three co-editors of the Giving Review, here today talking with Michael Mechanic, who's a senior editor at Mother Jones magazine and author of a new book called Jackpot, How the Super Rich Really Live and How Their Wealth Harms Us All. I think this is your first book, Michael, is that right?
That's right.
It's a book that has been reviewed in the Giving Review by me. So we'll maybe throw a link about that in the post of which this will be a part. And you should feel free, of course, Michael, to rebut that at any point here if you want. But well, how long have you been at Mother Jones?
13 years now.
Okay, and you
a long time.
It's all relative. You came to Mother Jones from what? Do I say alternative publishing? You were at Alternative Weeklies before that?
I was a managing editor of an alt weekly in Oakland called the East Bay Express, which at the time had a large editorial budget, and we were really doing some great in-depth, long form stories. So I was sort of both managed that. The news business has mostly been magazines, weeklies, monthlies, not so much daily. I did a little bit of daily stuff, but not a great deal.
What is the state? This is a different whole issue. What's the state of alternative journalism now? Does the alternative for which you first worked there, does that still exist, or is it all online? Or
there is a print paper of that publication now, but I kind of saw there was the paper was sold, and we didn't have the deep pockets behind us anymore. And all of a sudden, everybody was doing 2 jobs and then 3 jobs. And it was clear that things were going to be unsustainable. I mean, the internet was taken over. Craigslist had taken all the classified ads away from the alt weeklies, which were a big cash cow. And so what are you left with? Escort ads, which readers hate. The entire alt weekly universe has really shrunk and dwindled and is in its last throes right now. People have tried to make it work by going online and so forth, but these are advertising supported vehicles, and between Facebook and Amazon, just sucking up all the advertising, it's pretty hard to compete.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about, just quickly, because I see a book by Anand Girdhardras behind you, the state of journalism about philanthropy, coverage of philanthropy, analysis of philanthropy, you sort of like discuss what's the state of that? Is it a niche not well filled enough, or what? Is there enough of it? Is it good?
Well, I think there had been sort of inside the industry stuff for a long time, of course, and there's publications, Chronicle Philanthropy and Inside Philanthropy and so forth. But as far as sort of mainstream popular, authors and publications really looking into this world, there hadn't been a whole lot of that. I think the Girdhardras book, Winners Take All, raised a lot of questions for a lot of people. That kind of kickstarted a conversation that I think is still going on. And then there was, I cite in my book, a book called Just Giving by Rob Reich, not the Robert Reich, who's Clinton's former Treasury guy, but he's a political scientist at Stanford. And I can't remember exactly, just some quirky thing he found out kind of got him interested in this, and he started delving into sort of the nuts and bolts. And then he has a prescription for what he would do to try and make philanthropy more, useful. There was also a book called The Givers, is it? I mean, there's been a number of them recently. So I think there's been a renaissance of this kind of stuff. Now, my book covers a wide range of things. I could say that any one chapter in this book has been, there are books on those things, but in a way, it's kind of a survey of this world, where I put everything together, and I think that's the strength of it.
So when and where did you, or when and why, I guess, better question, did you decide to, write this book?
Well, writing a book in general had always been on the bucket list. I've been putting it off for forever because, it's a huge undertaking. and I knew it was a huge undertaking, but I didn't know how big until I did. I was actually thinking I could take a year off of work and write a book in a year, and that was very naive. It took me two, and that was, by the end of it, I was working 7 days a week, long hours, just nose to the grindstone. And there's a lot of work that it's things you don't think about, because it's not just writing, it's all the fact checking, it's all the compiling of endnotes. It's just, when you're writing nonfiction, but it makes me wish I had written a novel. I just make things up, right?
You got to write a Romana Clay on rich people or something. But
so you're asking about the origin of the idea. It actually was it was a little bit, it's sort of one of those back burner ideas that I had a long time ago, just sort of thinking about the lives of lottery winners. People come to cash, like a lot of money very quickly. And how does that affect them? And of course, we have this conventional wisdom that it ruins your life. I wasn't quite sure about that. I was like, well, what if you could really get these people to talk to you? And each chapter, it would be called Jackpot. That was sort of the concept. It would be called Jackpot, and each chapter would be a different person, family, whatever, their whole experience, their saga. And then I kind of thought, well, that's not really, it would be a little limited. I think it would get repetitive after a while. I think you're going to see a lot of similarity in the experiences. I don't think it ruins everyone's life by any means. I think that's the stories we hear a lot about. And there's other people who just win the lottery and they go, they upgrade their house a little bit and they don't tell anybody, or if they can help it, they don't tell anybody, and just try to live a regular life. But what happens sometimes when you come into massive sum, you realize, okay, now I got to be a philanthropist, whether I like it or not. And maybe that's something you wanted to do with your life, and maybe that's not. I mean, I could, when you fantasize about it, it's like, it sounds fun, right? Giving people money, what could be better? But it's a full-time job. And if that's not what you want to do with your life, it can be a burden.
Mm-hmm. So for what audience did you write the book? And did, in your mind, the audience maybe change as you were writing it in some way?
Well, I really wanted to hit as wide an audience as possible. I mean, as you pointed out in your review, it's funny, you called me true to form, or what is it? What was the word you used?
I might have said, I held your Mother Jonesness against you, I guess, in an unfair way.
Yeah. Well, that's not fair, because we are not necessarily our jobs.
Yes.
A job and a crusade are two different things. I do, Mother Jones is a progressive publication, but it's also a publication that does a lot of really top-notch journalism that is not informed by a liberal bias. That is, we go and profile conservatives, we profile people that are, important in what's going on right now. And maybe our choices of what to cover have the progressive slants, like we might think of it this way, but in the actual cover, in a lot of the actual covers, I mean, if you look at social media, of course, social media is going to seem outrageous. It's clickbait, right? But when you look at the actual stories, if we write a feature about a prominent conservative, it's a real piece. It's not liberal agenda. It's we try to understand that person, and so in some cases, it's just we are showing their worldview. And you can read that story as a liberal and go, oh my God, this is terrible. And you can read it as a conservative and say, well, yeah, that's about right. I mean, that's sort of what I wanted to do with this book. I wanted a book where you would take from it what you brought to it in a way. There was an interesting experience I had. I was in journalism school at Berkeley, graduate school of journalism here. There's a filmmaker named John Else, a very famous documentarian. And I was in a documentary class. He came in to talk to us, and he showed a film, and this was a film he did about Liberty University, Jerry Falwell's very fundamentalist institution. And there were just these sort of, this is a bunch of pretty liberal students at Berkeley. We watched it and we were kind of aghast. We were like, oh my God, how did you get this access? He said, well, they commissioned me to do this. Yeah. And we're like, well, what did they say when you showed them this film? And he said, oh, they were like fine with it. Yeah. And it just shows you, you come at it with a different worldview. And I wanted my book to be that way. I wanted a conservative to be able to read it, a liberal to be able to read it, and how they felt about it would depend on who they are. But I didn't want to. I really, I know you felt I was going all social justice in the end, but I there had to be a point to it in some way, and I did try not to shove it down people's throats at all. I feel like I did a fairly good job. In fact, it's funny, the New York Times reviewed the book,
Yeah.
and they felt I wasn't tough enough on the wealthy, right? They thought I was too empathetic.
Yeah.
So you can't win, right?
Well, no, you cannot win. But okay, and I obviously want to get to that for fun in this conversation. But first, let's just go through the book.
Sure.
Including first, just define super rich, I guess, as you use it in the book or however you want. But what is super rich? I guess I'm looking for a number, right? But
30 million and up was how I defined it, ultra wealthy. And
Yeah.
that's what WealthX uses. This is an analytics company that looks at luxury statistics in the luxury industry and basically profiles these markets. What are the billionaires up to? What are the ultra wealthy up to?
Yeah.
And then there's like high net worth is a pretty low bar. Like high net worth is anyone with like $1 million and up in net assets, meaning in addition to your house.
Yeah.
And ultra wealthy or ultra high net worth, they say, is 30 million and up. Yeah. And then you go on to the billions. Now, obviously between 30 million and 500 million is it's a world of difference.
Yeah.
But you can still live, if you have 30, 50 million, you're not going to lose all that money unless you're investing in Bitcoin or something. If you're smart, you can have that money and it'll sustain you for generations. And your kids won't have to work if you didn't want them to. I mean, I don't think that's a good idea, but just in theory, right? You wouldn't have to work. You could live off your investments. And that's sort of like when you're ultra wealthy, it kind of gets into the fantasy realm at that level.
Yeah. So totally unfair question. How do the super rich really live? Right. I'm on the time constraint I'm putting on. You wrote a book about it, but they were sympathetic figures, many of the super rich to whom you spoke in there, and those who work for them. And I wanted Schadenfreude, but how do the super rich really live?
You wanted Schadenfreude? I mean, yeah, of course the readers want Schadenfreude, I suppose, but you get it when you realize the super wealthy have the same problems we do, except in a way they're amplified, and certain aspects of them are really amplified. Your family dynamics, we all have family tensions, but when you drop $50 million in there, it can make them a lot bigger, and you can have major squabbles over money and major sibling rivalries. One sibling gets rich, the other isn't. They're fighting their whole lives over, you should be supporting me or whatever. I mean, every family is different. Obviously, child rearing is a can of worms when you have a lot of money. It's like, even if you grew up somewhat middle class or even upper middle class, whatever, you end up with an extraordinary sum of money, and you want to instill your kid with these values that you grew up with, but they never have to want for anything. I mean, unless you artificially make that happen for them, right? I'm not going to give you anything. And I've heard, actually, I talked to some of the folks in my book, the very wealthy people, about their thoughts on, how much they would leave to their kids, how they would leave it, when. I mean, these are all big questions if you have a lot of money. And it's like, I have all this money. How much do I give to charity? How much do I, allow the government to take? And it really is allow the government to take with the things that are available, which I kind of get it. That was surprising to me in a way. The whole, only morons pay the estate tax. Well, if you want to define it that way, it's like you can avoid the estate tax pretty easily. There are trade-offs, but you can avoid it. And that was sort of weird to me. It's like, wow, you can have, you get hundreds and hundreds of millions and just pass them along and not be taxed on them if you use certain structures. And that was because most of my readers will have never been, introduced to that realm. You're not, how many of us sit with an estate lawyer who's going to talk to us about these complex trusts? No,
Yeah.
you only do that if you have the money. So yeah, you come into money, you realize there's this whole crazy world out there that is there to protect your wealth.
Yeah. All right, well, why don't we end part one there and pick up with part two next?